Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says Digital Nation. At the Bengaluru Tech Summit, Prime Minister Narendra Modi recently went on to say that Digital India has become a way of life for the poor, marginalized, and for those in the government. In this backdrop, we have to understand what is the Digital India machine, what are the various important components of this machine, what are the advantages of this mission, and we have to understand the challenges when it comes to its execution. First up, what is this Digital India mission? This is a flagship program of the government of India. What does it want to do? It wants to transform India into a digitally empowered society and also wants to enhance the knowledge economy when it comes to India. So this is done by implementing the high speed internet connectivity and also improving digital literacy under the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. The motto of the Digital India mission is power to empower. What are the main components of this Digital India mission? The first is the digital infrastructure, second is delivering services digitally, and third is what is called as the digital literacy. What is this digital infrastructure? Basically, this is about establishment of the physical resources. So what are these physical resources? This can be computerized devices, this can be fixed broadband, this can be mobile towers, this can be data centers. So all those physical components required for providing internet connectivity is what is called as the digital infrastructure. So these are the physical resources that which is required for the communication to be provided across the length and breadth of India. This is what we understand by digital infrastructure. Then what are the services that we are speaking about? When we are speaking about services, there are basically three types. What are those? One is the government to government. Then we are speaking about government to the business and also about government to the citizens. So what is the government to government services? Let's say for example, there are softwares that are built for the government. That is what is called as the government to government service. Let's say for example, in the state government of Karnataka, there is one of the important softwares that is run. It is called as Kajane. So what is this Kajane? This is one of the treasury softwares built by the government of Karnataka for providing services which is included under the government to government service. So delivering all these services for the government to the government is government to government service. Then we have something called as the government to business service. What is this government to business service? Let's say for example, if the business has to be conducted in India, what we require is easy implementation of that particular business module. So what does the government do? The government comes up with a plan of including a portal in it or an application where all that the business will have to do is upload all these documents on this particular application or on that particular website. So one such example is the eBiz portal. What exactly happens? All the documents from the businesses will be uploaded on this particular document and there is no intermediaries or there is no corruption as well. That is what is called as government to the business services. Then we have something called as the government to the citizen services. So what are these? All the portals and the applications which the government has developed so that there is ease in communication with the government and the citizens is what is called as the government to citizen communication. Let me give you some of the examples. We have number of services that are provided by the government. Let's say for example the FASTag. The FASTag happens to be one of the government to the citizen module where what you have is the delivery of service provided by the government where you don't have to pay the toll charges physically, but instead there is automatic detection of the toll charges as you allow your vehicle to pass through the toll gate without stopping for the payment. One such service is the example that we have taken under consideration for the government to citizen compartment. So all these services will be provided when it comes to the delivering services digitally. The third important factor or the component of Digital India mission is what is called as digital literacy. So first, the government has developed the infrastructure. Next, the government has introduced applications portal so that the ease of doing business or communicating with the citizens has comparatively been reduced, and this has also improved the services over a period of time. But for this delivery of the service, what you require is people to use it. But for people to use it, one, they should have an awareness about it, so the government will have to give them the knowledge about it. Second is that people should know how to use it. So what should the government do? The government should also provide the information and how to use this particular module. That is what is called as digital literacy. So the digital literacy is about giving the awareness to that particular person or to that particular business, and also ensuring that knowledge is provided to the people. So these are the very important components when it comes to the Digital India mission. Now the question is, how are we digitally connected? In the present scenario, what we have is the number of people have smartphones in their hands. When smartphones are present, what we are connected through the internet is about 750 million connections. So we have as many as 750 million connections, all because of the penetration of this smartphone. So how are we utilizing it? Earlier, when you look at number of bills that we had to pay, let's say for example we had to pay BSNL bills, or let's say for example the water bills or the internet bills, all that we had to do was go to that particular place, stand in those long queues. But now, with the advancement of the technology and digital tools, we do not have to go and fall in line and wait for a long period of time. So this smartphone technology and internet penetration has allowed us to save the time as well as cost when it comes to filing our bills. Then we have online education, telemedicine. COVID-19 pandemic has also induced that education can also be carried forward on the online platforms, and even certain services with respect to the law called as telelaw is also being enhanced by the government through this particular digital penetration. So the government is able to provide all these services via the internet communication technology, and even we are able to use the penetration of the internet for our own advantages as well. With this, we understand that there are number of advantages when it comes to the internet penetration. This is not all. When it comes to the Digital India mission, the challenges with respect to the implementation is many, says the author of this article. So what are these challenges? When it comes to India, there is high level of digital illiteracy, which is the biggest challenge for the implementation of Digital India program. Low digital illiteracy is the major hindrance for the adaptation of the technology. In spite of the infrastructure, in spite of the government providing all the services on the online platform, if people are not aware of it, if people are not ready to use it, and if people don't know how to use it, there is continuous digital illiteracy, and ultimately the fruits of all these services are not met, says the author. A key component of this Digital India mission is high speed of internet, but India is not meeting the global standards. The internet speed which is provided in the United States of America or in United Kingdom or in majority of the developed countries is still not being met by the Digital India mission. The biggest challenge faced by the Digital India program is slow and delayed infrastructure. Yes, the urban cities have all the physical devices, they also have all the storage that is required for the digital infrastructure, but what about the remote areas? What about the left wing hit regions as well? What about the remote areas and villages in the northeast or in couple of other regions in India? These regions do not have the required infrastructure. So India's digital infrastructure is comprehensively inadequate to tackle the growing cases of digital transactions. India is also in an unviable position of being extremely vulnerable to the cyber attacks as well. It is said sometimes that China might take just 8 minutes to dismantle the core infrastructure of India. Such is the pathetic condition when it comes to the India's digital infrastructure. So cyber attacks, cyber warfare, cyber terrorism has been constantly happening, and we do not have enough provisions when it comes to stopping the cyber attacks is the major concern under the Digital India mission. India also lacks a privacy law, without which the initiatives like the digital locker which the government has come up with, or e-hospitals which the government is planning to come up with, are open to misuse by the state itself. So all these are the problems when it comes to the Digital India mission. So the government in this particular case will have to make sure that all these different aspects or challenges when it comes to Digital India mission has to be sorted out, and all these issues will have to be curbed going forward for the successful implementation of the Digital India mission. So what is the way forward? When you look at the digital infrastructure, the government has developed it. The government has also made sure that there are services that are provided to the citizens. But what is not met currently is the deadline when it comes to the execution. So going forward, they need to have a policy with respect to the deadline of meeting a service delivery. And at the same time, the functioning of citizen-centric services should also be a right place where this particular initiative can be taken up, says the author of this article. So meeting the service delivery parameters and the time for which this particular delivery has to be submitted will have to be taken into picture going forward, says the author of this article. It is this that we have to understand with reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about the time use survey. We have the National Statistical Office. It is one of the wings of the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. It has recently conducted what is called as the time use survey. First, let us try and understand what is this time use survey. Let's say, for example, I as a person am working for Byju's. So I work for Byju's for about 8 hours. I take about 2 hours for traveling, and after I get back home, let's say I'm going for the music classes, and in the evening I engage myself in cooking, and these are the time where I spend for myself. So what is the time? There is about 8 hours of work, 2 hours of travel, 2 hours of cooking, and 2 hours of music class. So what time every single individual will be utilizing for his or her own productivity, which is for the paid work and for the unpaid work and also for the leisure, is what is called as the time use survey. So what is here? We have the time, and how are we using this particular time is being conducted by a particular survey, that is by the National Statistical Office. So according to this particular survey, they will have n number of people where they interview them, and they'll ask them what is the time that they are looking and paying for the paid jobs as well as for the unpaid work. So this particular survey categorizes the paid as well as the unpaid work when it comes to this particular survey. So what is the importance of this particular survey? The survey basically measures the participation rate, time spent on the paid activities, care activities, unpaid activities, so on and so forth. So the primary objective of this time use survey is to measure the participation of the men and women in paid and unpaid activities. So basically, when we are looking at different parameters of this time use survey, it look into the unpaid caregiving activities, volunteer work, unpaid domestic service, learning, socializing, leisure activities, self-care activities, so on and so forth. So as we initially discussed, this is a particular survey which will ask that particular person how is he utilizing his time when it comes to his daily activities, whether for these daily activities is there a paid amount that is paid or is it an unpaid activity. And this will also help us understand whether men and women are employed equally or there is any difference when it comes to their employment opportunities. Now the question is, has India conducted this time use survey before? The answer is a no. Why? Because India is conducting this activity for the very first time. So what was the time period that was considered? The time period that was considered with India is January to December 2019. But when it comes to other countries, let's say for example, the United States of America, it has been conducting it annually since 2003. We have countries like Australia, which had conducted its full-scale national survey in 1992. Canada has been doing it since 1961. Germany, Austria and Israel had also conducted similar surveys as well. But when it comes to India, it is happening for the very first time on a pan-India basis, and that where it was considered for a period from January to December 2019. Why is measuring time use survey very important from the perspective of India? That is because we have the sustainable developmental goals, and we also have the resolution of the 19th International Conference on Labor Statistics for the implementation of the sustainable developmental goals. And also, with respect to the resolution of the labor statistics, what we require is numbers. Only when we have the numbers, we would be able to come to a conclusion whether we have met that particular criteria, that particular target or the goal with respect to the sustainable developmental goal, or with respect to the resolution of the labor statistics. So we require the numbers. Only when we have the numbers, we would be able to say whether we have been successful or not. This particular data will also help us in understanding the socio-economic concerns within that particular country. Let's say, for example, we have the men and women. It is assumed that India is kind of patriarchal society. So do we allow the women to actually work? If we are allowing women to actually work, what is the percentage of women who are working? All this will give us a clear picture about the socio-economic conditions that which is prevalent in India. So what are the reasons why this is important? One is we know for the fact whether we are implementing the sustainable developmental goals or the labor statistics issues, and the other is with respect to knowing the understanding of the major socio-economic conditions that which is prevalent in India. Let's take some of the examples with respect to the sustainable developmental goals. We have one of the goals when it comes to the SDG, and that includes goal number 5, which speaks about gender equality. When it comes to this particular goal, we have one of the target as defined under 5.1, which speaks about ending the discrimination against the women and girls world over. Then we have another target under 5.4, which speaks about unpaid care and domestic work. Then we have another target at 5.5, which speaks about effective participation and equal opportunities for the women leaders to flourish in that particular region. So for all this to be executed, and whether we are meeting these parameters and goals, what we require is statistics and numbers. So for us to understand and to make sure whether there is gender parity or not, successful implementation of the time use surveys numbers is required for the sustainable developmental goals. Therefore, what we actually see is the time use survey and its details can become very important when it comes to measurement of the sustainable developmental goals. But the author in this particular case says that India has failed in actually making changes when it comes to the time use survey. Why? Because we previously had one of the surveys called as the employment unemployment survey. So what is this all about? This usually measures about the employment or the unemployment in India, but this particular survey always underreported the informal workers, the number of women who are actually working, and in case there are people who are doing multiple jobs. Let's say I'm doing a work in the morning and evening, I also work and take up another job role as well. So such multiple jobs were not covered under the employment and unemployment survey. All these issues were to be corrected, changed, and brought a reformation when it comes to the time use surveys, but that is not implemented in the time use survey, says the author of this article. Further, whenever you look at any survey, according to the International Labour Organization, what you're supposed to look is whether that particular individual is working for 1 week. So this particular data will have to be collected. The samples and the interviews for that particular person will have to be collected for literally 7 days. But what is happening with respect to the time use survey is that they are collecting information for 1 or 2 days per person in a week. According to ILO, there has to be a collection of data for continuous 7 days. That is not happening in the present scenario. So the data collected by the time use survey might not be efficient and effective, says the author in this particular case. And further, when it comes to the informal sector, there is also frequently intermittent and irregular work as well. This was also not considered when it comes to the time use survey. Let's say, for example, in the informal work, let's say I'm working today. Because I'm in the informal sector, I might not be working tomorrow, or I might not be working for the next 5 days as well. When the statistician who's collecting, or the interviewer who's collecting this statistics, takes the interview only for 1 day or for 2 days, but he does not collect the data for the next 3 or 4 days, this means there can be an error when it comes to the informal sector as well. So the author in this particular case says that India has missed a golden opportunity of taking this particular survey to the next level, and because we have failed, maybe the sustainable developmental goals implementation or collection of data with respect to labor statistics might be wrong, or it might not be enough, says the author in this particular case. It is this that we have to understand with reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about the RCEP. We have discussed in our yesterday's session about the liberalization program, and we did discuss about the last week, and the link for the RCEP was also given. But there are two important parameters with respect to India. Can India go back to RCEP in the present scenario? If India wants to do, it can do it by giving a writing to the RCEP organization. But that will not be done by India, says the author in this particular case. Why? Because India and China also has issues along the line of actual control. In fact, India has also reduced the investments when it comes to the China. China is not able to make investments in India, and at the same time, India has also blocked couple of applications of the Chinese origin. So India might not go back to this RCEP because there can be floodgates that will be open for the Chinese investments or the applications or the goods that can be flooding into India. So India might not go, says this author. And at the same time, as we discussed yesterday, India is looking at Atmanirbhar Bharat. So India is looking at self-reliant India. So what it is looking at is increasing the domestic production and bringing up these Indian companies at the global level so that they are able to compete at the global level. So in this particular idea of Atmanirbhar Bharat, why would India let a foreign company come and dominate in India in the present circumstance, asks the author. So as a result, looking at these two provisions of self-reliant India and issues with China along the line of actual control, India might not go back to RCEP, says the author of this article. But for the rest of the analysis, you can listen to our yesterday's CNA and also the last week's CNA, where the link was given as well. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about the National Digital Health Mission. The entire analysis of what is this National Health Mission has been discussed elaborately, and the link for the same will also be given in our description box, so kindly look into it. Now let's look into some of the preliminary practice questions. Which of the following country accepts RuPay card? Singapore, Bhutan, UAE, Russia and Japan. The answer to this is 1, 2 and 3 only. Why have we taken this practice question? That is because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, RuPay card need not be accepted in every country. Only when India enters into an agreement with that particular country, that is when RuPay can be accepted and can also be used as a transaction as well. Currently, we have countries like Singapore, we have countries like Bhutan, UAE, which has accepted this agreement. So transactions can be made with the RuPay card. With reference to this article, Bhutan currently goes on to say that there is no Chinese village on its territory, and the same has also been accepted by its ambassador Wetsop Namgyel in India. Now let's look into the next practice question. Which of the following temples were constructed by the Hoysalas? Chinnakeshava temple, Hoysaleshwara temple, Keshava temple and Lakshmi Devi temple. The answer to this is 1, 2, 3 and 4. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference to the Hoysala architecture. So the article speaks about the Lakshmi Devi temple. This was built in Chatuskuta style. The temple was built by the Hoysala king Vishnuvardhana, and this temple and its idol was damaged according to this article. So kindly remember, all the 4 temples were constructed by the Hoysalas. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following statements. Election Commission can end the use of a particular symbol by a political party In case of a split, dispute over symbols will be decided by the Supreme Court as the final authority. Which of the statements above are correct? The answer to this is one only. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, whenever there is a political party and it is split into two different political parties and both these political parties are looking for one particular symbol, the election commission can completely suspend this particular symbol and can give different symbols to two different split political parties. And at the same time, in case there is a dispute over the symbol, the final authority is the Election Commission of India and it is not the Supreme Court or the High Court. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following statements with respect to Inter-Parliamentary Union. The organization was established after the Second World War as the Inter-Parliamentary Congress to promote democratic governance. It is headquartered at Geneva in Switzerland. It is financed primarily by members out of the public funds. Which of the above statements are correct? The answer to this is 2 and 3 only. Why? This particular organization was not established after the Second World War, but instead it was established in the year 1889 as the Inter-Parliamentary Congress. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Now let's look into the next practice question. With reference to Uganda, which of the following statements are incorrect? It is a landlocked country in Western Central Africa. Uganda is in African Great Lakes region. Which of the statements are incorrect? It is asking for the incorrect statement. So the answer to this is one only. Why? Because yes, Uganda is a landlocked country, but this is not on the western side, but it is on the eastern side of Africa. And also remember, it is also called as the African Great Lakes region. That is because there are a number of lakes like Lake Victoria, Lake Tanganyika and Lake Malawi which is present in this particular region, and that is why it is called as African Great Lakes region. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following statements with respect to red herring prospectus. It is a preliminary registration document prepared by merchant bankers for prospective IPO making companies. The document clarifies the reason why the company wants to raise money from the public. It should contain details of either price or number of shares being offered or the amount of issue. Which of the above statements are correct? The answer to this is 1 and 2 only. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference to initial public offering. So what is this initial public offering? This is for the very first time when a company offers its stock for the sale to the public. Let's say for example, if there is a particular company which is currently under the control of the family or friends or the professional investors like the venture capitalists or the angel investors, and all of a sudden if it wants to release the shares in the general public and if it is going for the very first time, that is what is called as the initial public offering. So one of the important parameters under the initial public offering is what is called as the red herring prospectus. So according to the question, both the statements in 1 and 2 are correct and the third statement is wrong. That is because it need not have to contain the details of either price or the number of shares that are being offered or the amount of the issue in this particular case. So they need not have to reveal all this information. Now let's look into the next practice question. The formation of ozone hole in the Antarctic region has been a cause of concern. What should be the reason for the formation of the hole? The answer to this is presence of prominent polar front and the stratospheric clouds and the inflow of the chlorofluorocarbons. Now let's look into the main practice questions. Digital India mission has induced economic inclusiveness and social transformation. Do you agree? Substantiate. What do you understand by time use survey? Has India missed an opportunity to implement the relevant sustainable developmental goals and International Labour Organization's important resolutions? Examine. So please write all your answers on the comment section, peer review, and also come up with constructive criticism. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.